Hello everybody and welcome back to Cat's Monthly Movie Reviews. I'm Cat and I'm joined by QJ.
We're across the pond. We're talking about movies. We're friends. It's 2017 and you've watched lots of movies this year, more than last year, and I have not done anything this year differently than last year.
Nope, you've been a bit... Well, you've read more comic books, I think. Anyway,
probably.
we're not here to talk about that. Go
No,
away.
we're not.
Go back to your
It's
show.
not my episode.
So basically, I aim to watch as many movies as I can, really, in a month, every month, and I'm going to talk about them. So, yeah, let's get right into the movies. The first two movies that I watched are part of a series. I watched Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey because I'm going on a science fiction time travel-y theme this month. It's a whole thing.
Are those science fiction films?
They're time travel films.
I know literally nothing about those films. I don't even know where I've heard the title before. Are they new or are they old?
Old. They're from I want to say late 80s. I don't really remember. They're basically, it's about two dudes and they're like, bro, dude, let's go do it. They need to do a history report but the future relies on them not failing the history report, so people from the future come back in time, give them a time machine so that they can do their history report. It's weird. It's very much like a stoner comedy. It's like quite dude bro-y. It's kind of, I don't know. It's hard to describe Bill and Ted, but I don't know. It was fun enough. It's chill, lighthearted. Both of them are quite. The first one's better than the second one, I think. Like the second one's kind of just like a bit of a stretch. It's like, we didn't need a sequel to this. The first one's fine on its own. Although, I don't know, like the second one they go to hell and they hang out with the devil for a bit.
Oh, it's fun.
That was pretty cool. They hang out with Death. They totally pwn him. It's like a chill movie that's lighthearted enough for me to just sit there, enjoy, and then the moment it was over, I was just like, yeah, that was a movie. I don't have any deep, interesting thoughts about Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. You know, it's just like...
Any deep thoughts on how they handled time travel? Or who cares?
Oh, there's some... They did some pretty funny things with it. Like, there's a point where they're like, oh, how are we going to do this? And they're like, oh, we'll just remember, in the future, we'll go back in time and leave the keys here. And then the keys are just magically there. Like, they just use it as a dumb plot device.
Worked out.
And it's like, oh... In the future, it's so, because if you actually think about it, that doesn't make sense because of time loops and the way time travel should work, but because it's a dumb comedy, it just gets away with it. They can just do that.
Yeah.
Like, they can just be like, the keys are going to be here because in the future, we're going to put the keys here. And it's like, but...
Well, they wouldn't have had the keys to put them there.
It doesn't actually make sense, but... But it does, because it's dumb comedy, so it doesn't matter.
I think time travel never makes sense, so it's almost like it's just pulling a joke at the fact that people work so hard to make time travel make sense, and it never does. And so they're just like, well, we do whatever we want, because...
it's kind of like throwing caution to the wind. Who really cares? We're a low stakes drivel movie where it's just funny and who cares, and it's funny enough that it gets away with it.
And that's what matters.
I didn't think it was hilarious, because I think a lot of the comic styles of that time are quite dated now. Like, if you that kind of, the way they talk is all that kind of bro, you're like, dude, that's so heinous, man. It's that style of comedy. It gets quite grating after two films worth, because you're just like, okay, I get it. I see it's fine, but it's alright. It's fine. Don't have a huge amount to say. On to this next movie, which is the big movie of this month, the one that you've seen, I've seen, we've all seen it.
Ooh.
If you haven't, I'm probably going to spoil it at some point. So I'll tell you when spoilers are going to start. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2
Yay!
Okay. Me and QJ have had an argument about this prior to this recording. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great movie. I thought it was fun. But I was a bit disappointed by it.
You're already contrasting the joy that I had.
I know.
Watching the movie.
It's because and I didn't come to this conclusion. My girlfriend came to this conclusion. At one point we were talking about it, and she just said to me, "The thing you have is you don't like it as a film, you like it as scenes." And that is the case. That's totally how I see this film.
Interesting.
I love scenes of it, but I don't like it as a film.
And I very much liked it as a film. You seemed to hate the plot, and I thought it was wonderful.
Because plot was drivel. But
No, it was fine.
can I say what I liked about it before we go into the argument, please?
No! You have to be negative!
No, I refuse. So, like, I loved every single scene. The moment the paths split in this film. Okay, spoilers. I'm just going to throw it out there. Spoilers. We're going to spoil it. There'll be a timestamp on screen. Go to that timestamp if you haven't seen Guardians Volume 2. I don't know how you haven't at this point, but if you haven't, skip the spoilers. The moment the two groups split is the point where the film picks up for me. Because every single scene with Rocket, Groot, and Yondu from that point onwards is amazing. Every single one of those scenes. Fantastic. Beautiful. The scene where Rocket fights the Ravagers might be one of my favourite scenes in anything ever. The scene where they're sending Groot to get the fin and he just doesn't get it. And there's that line where he's like, you hate people with hats? Why do you hate people with hats? Oh, because they've got weird. You think they've got a weird shaped head, but then they take the hat off. It's just a hat. Like,
is this really an important conversation?
That whole sequence is genius. Like the part where, like, the Taserface scene where Rocket's just laughing at Taserface, the scene where they kill all the Ravagers. That's just amazing. It's a beautiful scene. That whole arc between those three characters, amazing. The scene where Yondu is talking to Rocket and he's like, I know who you are because you're me.
You're me.
That scene, fantastic. But the other half of the film, the part that's supposed to be the thing that it rides on, I think was hugely lacking. I think it was incredibly weak because I don't think Ego is a good villain or character because he's supposed to, my problem with Ego as a villain is he's supposed to be this, like, celestial being, but he never talks like one. And it's like, yeah, he's trying to convince Peter that he's human, but he never slips up. He seems like too human. Like, he's written to be a human character, but he isn't a human character. So there's this weird inconsistency where he doesn't feel real. And he doesn't feel like a real part of the story or a real character. He just feels like a plot device. Hi, this is just me in post-production. I just wanted to add something I forgot to mention in this statement. What I'm trying to say is, even after the reveal that he's evil and he doesn't need to keep up the pretense of being humanoid, Ego continues to perform that way, and it seems really odd to me. I just wanted to add that because it kind of makes my point more valid. Bye. And that especially comes down to, like, the fact that you know full well how it's going to end from the start, because, I mean, you know how it's going to end from the trailers, because you know that Ego the Living Planet is in it, and you know that Rocket has a bomb. Oh, I wonder how this is going to end.
Well, you never know. Groot might push the wrong button. Kill everybody.
There's no tension in that, though, because it's obviously not going to... there was no tension in that whole ending.
Yeah,
like, none of the... Like, I
get that, but... Go ahead.
I found that Taserface and the Ravagers had more tension as antagonists. They were more interesting as villains to the film than Ego was, and they were the comedy.
That's not necessarily a flaw, though. I feel like
it kind of is, though.
No, I feel like it's kind of interesting to be like, hey, let's take a step back and realize that it's not always like the big, like, scary tyrannical guy that is causing the most harm. It's the people who are hating their leaders and are, like, mutinous against them, that when they band up, they actually cause a lot of mayhem and can be really scary.
I mean, it
just seemed a little more
I feel like that's
real to me.
Yeah, they felt more real, but they're the dumb side plot. Like, I feel like the main plot line should be better.
You were seeing them that way, but, like, maybe that's not, like,
if this whole film had been split into two films, I would only have seen one. I would have gone to see the Rocket, Yondu, and Groot one, like, several times. I wouldn't bother with the Ego. The Ego plotline's just not good. It's weirdly structured. The tone is like...
I don't agree. I love the background it gives. I mean, Peter already had background, but it gave a lot more emotional depth to, like, him and his mother and, like, what was going on with him as a child. And I don't know, like, it would have... I don't know how to explain what's going on in my brain, but I don't know.
I think I really liked time.
The idea that you do have this celestial being that's trying so hard to be a human and getting away with it, and then just being like, oh yeah, I do this to millions of creatures all over the universe, and, like, they all just believe me because I'm so good at lying, and just kills everybody.
I feel that it kind of just came out of nowhere. Like, people complain about, like, in Ant-Man when Yellow Jacket just kills a sheep for no reason, and they're like, oh, he's just a villain now for no real reason. But I felt the same thing with Ego. It was just like, oh, he's suddenly just a bad guy, and there was no build to it, really. He just suddenly was a bad dude, and now we got to stop him. And it
I
kind
thought
of
there was enough of a build because there were certain people who were doubting him, and I was certainly like, why is he all of a sudden like want Peter in his life? Like,
I think
what's going on here?
maybe if it wasn't Ego the Living Planet, and I didn't know. Maybe the problem is that I know from the comics, Ego the Living Planet is a bad dude.
I think that is
so
a
I'm
little
coming
bit of
into
an
it
issue.
immediately like he's gonna be a bad dude. When's he gonna become a bad dude? And there was no tension. There was no he might be a good dude at all. And if you had that tension, maybe the point would have it would have had more impact. But I think maybe that's my problem. Also, the exposition in the first act was horrendous. It was so just like forced. Hey Peter, where's your dad? Oh, I don't have a dad. Sovereign lady. Oh, why don't you have a dad, Peter? Oh, Drax coming up to him asking about his dad. Like, it was so forced.
It was a little awful. I felt like they
Like-
could have done this whole plot without that exposition because we know from the first
Yes.
movie that he was raised by his mother and that his father came
Yeah.
from space.
Yeah, you don't really need...
It was a little hand-holdy for the
Yeah.
people who were like,
And
I'm gonna go see the sequel without having seen the first one because I'm an idiot.
To be fair, there were people who went to see Civil War without having seen the first two Captain America films, and I was like, and they were like, "Ew, I shouldn't have to have seen all of the Marvel movies to understand one Marvel movie," and I'm like, "It's Captain America 3. How are you not getting this? Watch
Yeah.
the first two." But yeah, like I don't know that whole expositional opening. I feel like you could have cut a long point of that Groot sequence because don't get me wrong, that Groot sequence was fantastic. But I think it dragged, and I think it went on for
Which
a bit
Groot
longer than it
sequence?
needed to.
In
The
the
opening
beginning?
one where he's dancing.
Oh yeah, well that was just for the purpose of the credits, wasn't it? But it was
Yeah,
kind of
but
long.
It could have been cut a bit shorter, and then
I'm
that
gonna
could
be
have allowed
honest,
for a
like
bit more time.
one of my
to
favorite parts
develop
of the
things.
whole film was just when Groot. Well, first of all, I'm really glad with how Baby Groot turned out because I'm one of the only
Yeah, same.
people that didn't think that he was cute, and like pictures
Mhm,
of him
I'm
on
with you.
everybody's mugs and shirts and hats. But the way he was in the movie turned out really well because he was just
Yeah.
acting like a baby, and I just loved when
He was a
Gamora was
person,
like,
he was a character,
Groot,
you know.
get out of the way, you're gonna get hurt, and he just waves at her, and she's like, hi.
I
I'm
love
like,
the bit.
ah, it's so cute.
I think that the small interactions between Drax and Groot were amazing. Like when Drax smashes the boombox and Groot's just like punching him like weakly, and then like later on in the film where Drax is coming towards the ship and he's like, "Get out of the way, tiny and dumber Groot," and Groot's just like hitting his ankles. Like I loved that. It's like I love so many like tiny lines in the film, but
Yeah.
the structure and the pacing and the tone of it, I really don't like, and I feel like. It is an amazing film, and I did love it. Don't get me wrong, but I feel like if I'm gonna criticize Batman vs Superman and Suicide Squad and all these films that I don't like heavily for their structure and their like pacing and things like that, I have to apply the same things to a film like this.
I guess.
I love it, but I don't want to blindly love it, and I want to be able to critique it because I think that's only fair.
And
I think pointing out the flaws I see are only fair.
it really depends on like, well, first of all, what you have when you go into the movie, which is like your knowledge of Ego the Living Planet, which I had the same.
Mhm.
But I think it just depends on how you're taking it because you took it
Yeah.
as a criticism of Ego as a villain,
Yeah.
as like how he was behaving as a celestial living planet, whereas I took it as like, wow, this guy's horrible for what he's doing to Peter and like traumatizing him and admitting that he killed his mother and like
Yeah.
I was focusing more on the emotional impact it had on this character that I liked and what he was already going through with his like personal struggles and whatnot. So I didn't really care as much about how Ego the Living Planet was behaving and coming across, even though I personally thought that was fine. But I think
See,
so like you were focusing more on that where I was focusing more on Peter.
I think what you're saying about the emotional side of things, I did. There were a few scenes that did really work in that sense. Like when Ego's like, I couldn't go back to an Earth without your mother, and Peter just says like, I had to watch her die. That was a really good moment. But the
Yeah.
problem I think it had was the tone shift. It's hard to take a scene like that seriously and have it have any weight or stakes when it cuts to like some scene about like Drax doing a goofy line of dialogue with Mantis or Rocket and Yondu having a goofy fun time. Like the tone shift, it was so sudden in a lot of those scenes. It just suddenly cut
There was a
to
lot
like
going on.
yeah, it was kind of a mess.
I guess that's the
I
point.
thought, and it was like it's hard to take those sort of scenes like seriously and for them to have any weight because
I
there's no
mean,
time
yeah,
to linger on them. You know, you can't.
it was kind
There's
of
no time
hard
to
when
think
one
about
moment I
it
was like
because
tearing up because he was finally playing catch with his dad, and the next moment you have
yeah,
Rocket and Yondu flying through space and their eyeballs bulging out.
yeah, yeah, because there's no time to reflect on those scenes because you're
Eh,
immediately whiplashed into something completely different. And I think that was to the fault of the movie. And it did. One of the things I will say is amazing about this movie is that it feels more like a comic book movie than any other film I've seen.
yeah,
It's
it,
so much of a comic book, and I love that. Like all of these mismatched stories all connecting together, and
hmm
like
but that's why the
the
tone
scene
shift
that
really doesn't bother me. Like, I feel like I'm watching a really fun, really emotional comic book, and it just the tone shift I feel like fits with Guardian's style.
see, I think the reason what I see it as is it's like you were reading Scotty Young's wacky Rocket series, but you were also reading Brian Michael Bendis's Star-Lord series, and if you'd read them one after another, it would have been fine. But because you were reading one page of the wacky one page of the serious one, it doesn't blend.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that was one of the big problems I think it had. I don't want to seem like I hate this movie though, because I want to say good things about it. Like the scene that I was talking about earlier with the Ravagers and Rocket fighting in the woods, that felt exactly like it had come straight out the pages of a comic book, and I loved it. I love
Yeah,
the shot where like one of the Ravagers is like, "What are you gonna do now? You don't have your toys," and Rocket just jumps in his face and just starts beating him to
punching him.
death. It just
Yeah, that's very much a
it was
Scotty
so
Young
good.
scene.
Yeah, and like the scene where, and also because of the music, because like Southern Nights is playing, and it's such a plinky plonky song during that whole scene. It's so good, and like the scene where Yondu's just killing all the Ravagers, and like Come a Little Bit Closer's playing in the background. It's so like the tone shift between that song and what's happening is so beautifully juxtaposed that it's like it's brilliant. Also, I absolutely love because I've been a strong follower of this theory since like the beginning of the MCU. I've
The
always
Stan Lee
believed it.
thing.
I've always stood by it. Yeah, the Stan Lee thing. And like I didn't even like I know that a lot of people also think the same thing, but I thought about it independently. Like I did like
I
it
thought
feels
it
douchey to
first.
say. I don't think I came up with it first, but I came up with it on my own and then I saw other people saying it online and I was like,
No,
hell
that's
yeah. But
valid.
like I've always stood by the fact that Stanley was either Uatu the Watcher himself or he was working with the Watchers. And that was confirmed, and it blew my mind. I was so happy.
Yay!
It was like, oh, I loved it. I was just
I'm
so
smart.
intensely
I'm
happy.
smart. I'm smart.
Like, especially since James Gunn has said in interviews that, like, he saw it as a fan theory and thought it was cool, so he put it in. Like, that just makes me so happy. Like, the it's just beautiful. Also, I love that Howard the Duck cameo. I like because I
Oh
love
yeah.
Howard the Duck. I think he's
What was
amazing.
it? Once you go
I
duck,
just
you never go back, or something.
it was a play on that, and it was just beautiful.
My favorite line from the whole movie was when Yondu said he was Mary Poppins.
Yes, that's a very good line. I really like
Because
the
at first
scene
Peter was making fun
between.
of him, but he's like, "No, Mary Poppins rocks," and I'm like, "Heck yeah, Mary Poppins rocks! She's awesome."
I also love the one where Peter calls Rocket a trash panda, and Rocket's like, is that worse?" Because the delivery on that, when Chris Pratt is just like, it's so much worse. Like his little face, you can just see like it's so genuine and it's beautiful. And I love the line where Drax says he's famous for his turds. Like that just it was such an
You
immature
would love that
line, but
joke.
it killed me because it's just so out of nowhere. You just don't expect a character like that to say something like that, and it was beautiful. Like as I said earlier, I love scenes and I love lines in that movie, but I think as a film, it's off. I think there's something wrong about it. Don't get me
Mm,
wrong, I loved it. I thought, but it's just like I have to. It's just this nagging thing in the back of my mind that's like I have to
you
point
have
the
to point
criticisms
out,
out
yeah,
because I not just to be hateful or to be a cynic, but because it's
that's
only
your
fair.
job.
Like I just can't let it get away with having a bad structure because I think Guardians Volume One has so much heart to it and it has so much beauty and it has so much flow to its structure and everything
Mhm.
just perfectly works together and it's such a beautiful
It really made
thing
me want
of
to watch Volume 1 again.
yeah
Like, it was
like I
such a
think
good movie.
compared to Volume 1, Volume 2 is like, it's fun, but it's not. There's no heart to it. I didn't feel as much. You know, at the end of Volume 1, I'm like, oh, this is beautiful. You know, they all come together. They've all set aside their differences. They've all realized that they're misfits, and they've all got nothing except for each other, and they've come together. But at the end of Volume 2, I'm just like, I guess Rocket had a sad arc. But that's about it. And Nebula's scene, and I didn't think
Rocket
I'd actually
had
get
kind of a
anything good
sad
from
arc in
Nebula.
the first one too.
Yeah, he did.
And
'Cause there's that
honestly,
beautiful
since
scene.
oh, go ahead.
Got it. There's that beautiful scene where he's just like, he's drunk and he's yelling about how like
Yeah.
he's an experiment.
Oh,
and
that
it's
was
just
my
like,
favorite scene in the first movie. I was like,
Mhm.
oh my
It's beautiful.
goodness, poor Rocket.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Volume 2 had going for it more than Volume 1 is because Volume 1 already had all its character introductions with like the main characters. Volume 2 was just able to play with that and like give us more of who the characters are without having to introduce anything. Like Gamora was definitely a lot better in Volume 2 than Volume 1. She was written better. Really?
I think she still kind of felt just like a plot device. You know? Like Nebula was written better, but Gamora just felt like a
she
secondary.
had better moments as just, you know, a badass warrior who like
Okay, she did have that one shot where she picks up a gun from a ship and shoots with it. That was beautiful.
Yeah, that was the best, but she had a lot of really good moments where she was just showing like how powerful she was, and her interactions with Peter were better in this movie than they were in the first one because it was way too like forced and gross in the first one, and in this one
really?
it was.
Because I thought that about this one.
Well, I mean,
I thought that whole arc was just like, why is this here?
Well, yeah, it was unnecessary, but I think it was, if it had to be there, it was just there. Like, it didn't overpower anything, and it wasn't corny, and it was kind of just like saying like Peter has feelings, and that's all they are, and like we're not going to do anything about it, because they didn't do anything about it, except the one line at the very end of the film that like she didn't have to say because.
Yeah, that line was dumb. I think Gamora should just forever be completely emotionally distant towards him. I think that's how that should be, because you don't see that very often, and I think that would be great if they kept that going.
To be like, if she had just forever been like, yeah, I don't want to be with you. I'm like, yeah, that's good because Gamora doesn't want to be with anyone. And
apart from that one time, she had sex with Tony Stark so hard that he almost died.
Yeah, well, that's not emotional. It's just banging the hell out of someone.
I love that scene exists. Comics are weird.
Yeah, that's very much
one thing I did actually legitimately really like love arc wise is I like the subtle Drax Mantis thing. I like how
I thought that was silly.
Oh no, I loved, because I love Drax, right? Any Drax that happens is just for the best, because Drax is the best thing ever. The scene where he's just like saying that she's ugly and she's just like, yeah. That's it. Our whole scene was beautiful. But also the thing where he says like,
ugly. You're not ugly.
When he says the line, "It's good to be ugly because then you know when someone really loves you."
Mm-hmm. Oh, that
line is beautiful. I love the message there, and I love what that whole scene is saying. And I think the way that they did him kind of appreciating her, even though she's not physically strong, was, I think, quite cool. Like, and the scene where it's not obvious, but the scene where at the end, like, Ego's kind of killing everyone, and he lifts her above to almost sacrifice himself. Like, that was to me just gorgeous. Like, as a piece of visual,
I really did like
way
them
of
as
showing
friends.
this.
Like, I feel like they're, because you're saying it was kind of a love arc, but it was much more of like a friendship arc with like the fact that they both grossed each other out romantically, like blending in there. He like starts dry heaving, and she's like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "I'm imagining being with you." And she's like, "I don't even like what you are." And he's like, "Well, that's mean." Like, and yet they have a cute little bond. And then
I don't really even think it was a romantic love arc, but like the way they kind of learned, like Drax learned to kind of see her in a positive light, even though she didn't fit how he perceives something to be good. You know, he's like, over the course of the film, he realizes, and it's subtle, it's not in your face, it's just like, you see him lifting her at the end, and it's like, oh, now he sees value in her, and it's, I don't know, I thought that was really cool. I thought it was a neat
I
way
wish there were more
giving,
relationship arcs like that in more movies, where people are just not necessarily, like, falling in love with each other, but just, like, learning to appreciate each other and, like, value other people as friends or
Yeah.
as whatever.
Because also, thinking about it, there is a point where he mentions that she reminds him of his daughter. So it might not even be, because it's very vague in what is happening there. It might not even be a lover, because at the end he says that she's beautiful, right? But that might not be him saying that in a romantic way. That might be him saying that in a kind of like, I appreciate you now way, because like almost in a like father daughter like way, like because she reminds him of what he'd lost, and
Yeah, and
because it's so vague, you can interpret it in different ways. Oh, it's great. I love it. It's
and
a
I
good part
love
of that
the
film.
idea that as people I mean, this is very much true for me, that we become more attracted to people that we just generally enjoy, people we like, and like the more we like someone for who they are, whether they're like a celebrity that we admire or one of our friends, like we like them so they become more appealing to us visually or whatnot. And so throughout the course of the movie, at first he's just like, you're ugly, but that's fine. And at the end he he sort of loves her as a friend, and so he sees her as more beautiful.
It almost proves the point that he was saying earlier. He still like
thinks
she
that she's
knows
physically
that
ugly.
Yeah,
but
like no, but she knows that he means what he says at the end because he said that thing earlier about how being when you're ugly, that someone means it when they say that you're beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was just it was just a good scene.
Yeah, that was great.
But anyway, is that all? I think that's all I wanted to say about the film.
I'm
I
sure
really enjoyed
we'll
it.
come back to it here or there throughout the rest of the video.
The next film I watched, we're going back to time travel. QJ, it's time travel time. I was really ill, and I was sitting there like, I want to watch a movie, but I don't want to watch a movie that I have to think about. Because I was dying, I had a headache, I was just sick.
Aww.
So I sat down, and I went to the list of DreamWorks movies, and I was like, which of these have I not seen? Because that's what I do. Like, whenever I'm ill, I go and watch a DreamWorks film, because they're just so easy to watch. Like, you don't have to think, you just kind of sit there, and they entertain you. And I appreciate that about DreamWorks. I love DreamWorks. Have I mentioned that I love DreamWorks, QJ? Because I do. So I watched Mr. Peabody and Sherman, which is based on an old cartoon, I want to say. It's about a dog who adopts a boy.
Yeah.
He's a super genius dog, and he has a kid, and it's like, oh, we've flipped the thing. Normally a boy adopts a dog, but this time a dog's adopting a boy. It's classic DreamWorks style, because DreamWorks always do that. Yeah, but like it's if DreamWorks were going to adapt anything, it's got to be something where a thing does something it's not supposed to. That's what they do.
Like babies talking.
Yeah, like babies being a boss, or ogres hanging happily ever after, or
the
villains winning.
Yeah, or
Spoilers.
Bees not making honey for humans.
Okay, B-movie is a weird exception. B-movie doesn't fit the DreamWorks formula because B-movie is just weird and it doesn't make sense.
Up sharks.
Okay, Shark Tale can screw Shark Tale. Anyway, Mr. Peabody and Sherman is about a dog who has a kid, but he's like, everyone's saying dogs can't be a dad, but he is a good dad, and it's about them learning that he's a good. It's about like him being a good dad and proving that he can be, but also learning to let his kid grow up and not be so possessive. But it's all framed in this wacky time travel adventure where they go through time and they go to Egypt, and then they go to like the one with the horse that Monty Python ripped off. Then they go to like
medieval times.
No.
Wait, what?
It's like the horse, the big wooden horse.
Oh, the horse.
When was the big wooden horse?
The Trojan period. Trojan,
yeah, there you go.
Trojan War.
Yeah. And it's all like framed around like historical characters acting all kind of wacky and goofy, and like they go to the French Revolution. It's actually got a decent amount of like actual history in it for a wacky DreamWorks movie, and like there are some things where it's like, okay, this is like actually they're gonna get beheaded by the guy who beheaded people in the French Revolution, stuff like that, and like it's fun.
It sounds like a movie that like a history teacher would show to his students in 5th grade class.
Yeah, if you just couldn't be bothered to teach a lesson and you were just like, nah, just watch this, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fun enough. I was very ill when I watched it, so I don't really remember it that well. But like, I think one of the first lines of dialogue in the whole film that made me think, yeah, this is definitely DreamWorks, is early on, he's like it shows the dog as a kid, and like he's going up for like adoption, and people keep rejecting him. And
Oh.
one of the kids says, "I don't want this one. He's sarcastic." And I highlighted that quote because that's the most. Here's how DreamWorks establish a character, because every DreamWorks character is sarcastic. That is like the defining trait of a DreamWorks protagonist. That's how they make films. There has to be at least one sarcastic character. Otherwise, it's not DreamWorks. And it just felt so fitting to me. I was just like, yeah, this is definitely a DreamWorks protagonist. I'm cool with this. But like, he's like all condescending because he's such a like smart genius, and like, oh, it's good. I found it fun. It wasn't amazing, but it was good. It was fine. The
Cool.
next movie that I watched was a movie that is in cinemas at the moment. It's King Arthur: Legend of the Sword.
Oh yeah.
It's it's a story that didn't need to be told, but they
Because
did
it's been
enough.
told 7 billion times
Yeah,
in
and
probably many better ways.
they didn't do a hugely good job, I didn't think, of telling the story. Like the plot's dull and the characters are a bit weak and it's a bit of a mess. But this story is fantastically told visually. Everything
Okay.
about it is like, I mean, not everything about it. There are some scenes where it's just like, this is just shot normally, but like there are some scenes where it's just like, this is amazing to watch. It won't be on a small screen, but in a cinema it was like, wow. Like the way they do montages flows so perfectly. There are so many like sweeping shots where the camera kind of sweeps, and as it sweeps it cuts, so you don't quite notice it, but it's cut, and then it's like in the next part of the montage, and it's flowing really perfectly. Like there's this really good early on. There's a
Mm.
montage of Arthur growing up on the streets. He doesn't know he's a king. He's just like being brought up in a brothel, slowly building his wealth through crime. And it's really well cut, this montage. It flows beautifully, and it's like, this is praise be to the director for this, because it's amazing. Praise be to the editor. Praise be to just everyone who made this happen. This is beautiful. The action is incredibly well done. Like, there are some action scenes where I was just sitting there like, this is just amazing. Like, it's heart racing. It's like, just it's it's just it's beautiful. It's like it does. You know that thing where action films will like they'll slow down mid shot and then they'll speed up again to
Yeah.
contrast it. And some films overuse it. This film does it perfectly. Like there's one shot that I remember where it slows down as an arrow is coming past him. He grabs the arrow out of midair in slow motion, and then it speeds up as he stabs the arrow in someone's like chest, and it's just beautiful. Like the whole thing is just on point visually.
So
It's
this
not a good
movie,
story.
it sounds like one of those. Well, the Legend of King Arthur is an amazing story, but you have to tell it right.
Yeah.
This movie sounds like one of those examples of where the movie makers were just putting all their effort into certain
Hmm.
places and no effort into other places. They were probably like, oh, everyone knows this story, so we don't really have to tell it
Yeah.
very well. We'll just make the fighting cool. Like, and
Yeah.
those montages sound really fun to watch. It sounds like they could have
They
just
were.
been like,
Oh.
let's make a 30-minute long, well cut music video based on the Legend of King Arthur, and it would have been better than what you're saying the film was.
Nah, I don't know. I think you needed some bits where it was just talking to break it up, because otherwise it would have just been action. But the action was like on point. Like I appreciate what it did for its action incredibly well. But I feel like I could talk about what it didn't do well, but I don't need to. You can just go and read a review online. I bet every critic ever is saying like it's boring, it's dull, whatever. It's just an
Yeah.
action, whatever. Like, but I think it's good to like how everyone like I loved Guardians, but it's important for me to be able to criticize it. I think for a film like this, everyone
It's
knows.
important to point out the good things.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
everyone knows the good things about Guardians, so I don't feel the need to say them. But everyone knows that this
Mm.
like what might be bad about this film. If I just say it's kind of a dull plot, the characters are a bit weak, whatever, people just get that. I don't need to go into
Mhm.
depth of like hard criticism for this. I'm not a film critic. I'm someone who talks about it on a podcast. You know,
Yeah.
like I don't need to say this. I'd be just treading the same ground. But saying what's good about it, I don't know. I haven't read
Mhm. Well,
all
no,
of the reviews ever, but I
yeah,
feel like
I think
people
that's
aren't going to be
important.
talking about that as much.
And it's interesting because I don't remember if I talked to you about this last month, but I think we touched on it a little bit with the Hobbit films, that it makes me
Hmm.
sad that like a person like who's working on visuals or
Yeah.
something, basically something that's not the story in a film, someone who's working on the music or something could do a really, really, really good job,
Hmm.
and yet no one will know because like the plot or the story or the acting in the movie was bad, and so
Yeah.
everyone just completely dismisses the movie.
Hmm.
But there have to be, points where you're like, wait, let's at least appreciate that this particular crew did their job very well in this film,
Yeah.
and like if that was in a better movie, it would have made it like,
Yeah.
A plus plus better. And
Yeah.
it's just, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't really matter because we know those movies aren't going to be remembered in a couple years, but it's a little bittersweet that, or just
Hmm.
bitter, I guess, knowing that a good scene is going to be lost forever in the history of cinema because it was
Yeah.
in a subpar movie. No,
Yeah.
I don't know. That's life.
Yeah,
Not
like in this
everything good is
film,
well remembered.
everything is pretty much great apart from the script, and I feel like it's like the main actor is pretty good. He has some very good, like there's some really unexpected comedic beats in it. Like every now and then he'll just say something hilarious and I'm like, wait, what? Because you don't, it's so like, in a comedy film you're expecting jokes, so jokes are like, when a joke comes you're like, yeah, that was a joke. But in this film, every now and then a joke will just come and you're like, wait, what? And it'll be funnier because it's just out of nowhere. But yeah, like I know what you're saying. Like whoever did the cinematography in this film is going to be under like I want them to get a job on a film that's gonna be big. I'd love them to
Yay!
get. I'd love cinematography like this in a Marvel movie. I'd love it. It'd be amazing.
I
But
kind
I
of
think
like.
you're
I'm
right.
kind of
Yeah,
interested in seeing it just to get back in the groove of reading like King Arthur's old legends because I
yeah.
love them. I read a lot of them for the 1 year in college that I was an English major.
Ah, fair.
um, Even though I failed at that, but I still loved reading the material. So
Yeah,
yeah, I'd
yeah.
love to get back into that.
Yeah. It's good enough. There are some really good shots. Like the framing, everything about it is pretty on point. Like it's visually good, but yeah, that's about it. But it's fun to see in the cinema, if anything.
Cool.
The next film I saw was a film called Colossal. It's this like bizarre indie film that it's kind of all over the place with what it's trying
Mm.
to do. Basically, Anne Hathaway's character, whenever
Oh.
she is in a certain park, a giant monster forms in Korea that mimics her movements. And when you hear that concept, you
What?
think that it's going to be a goofy comedy, but it's not a goofy comedy. The trailers make it look like a goofy comedy, but it's not a goofy comedy. It like
Huh.
it's weirdly real. Like the characters act like real people, even though there's this wacky dumb thing that's happening to her. But they all, and the first act is I
Very
thought really
strange.
interesting. I thought the first act was great because it built them as people really well. But then the second and third act, it just didn't seem to know what it wanted to do because it had this main plot of like the giant monster thing happening, but also there was the like it goes into like it starts acting like it's about to be all about alcoholism because she gets drunk when she does it and stuff like that, and it starts making you think like, oh, this is about alcoholism, this is about alcohol abuse, this is going to be all used as an allegory for that, and then it stops being that and it starts being almost about an allegory for an abusive relationship, but it doesn't stick
Hmm.
on any of that for long enough for it to actually be meaningful. And the antagonist of the
Just kind of a
piece,
theme about like general crap that happens
yeah,
in life.
yeah, but it's, I don't know, as a film it doesn't stick well.
You
Like,
need more focus on like
yeah,
one.
it's just kind of all over the place, doesn't really know what it's doing. But I feel like that was what they were trying to do, is they were trying to do something that reflects real life, but also has this bizarre, absurdist like concept in it. And it didn't quite work. I think it's an interesting concept, but it didn't work very well, and it ends up kind of being a bad film because you're just sitting there like, what is happening here? And the antagonist just starts being an asshole for no reason really. And like it's implied that he's always been an asshole, and he's been acting like a good guy, and then he just suddenly becomes just a horrible person for no real reason. He just kind of snaps, and there's no build to it. It just kind of happens, and it's like there needed to be some sort of like hints that he was a bad guy. I mean, maybe there were, and I just missed them. I don't know. It was okay. It was. I say it's okay. It's not okay. It was a pretty bad film, but like I don't know. I could see what it was trying to do. It failed. Goodbye. The next
Wow,
film.
what a waste of Anne Hathaway.
Yeah, it was kind of a waste of Anne Hathaway. It's interesting because she does a good performance. Like, it's what you were saying earlier. Like, you can have someone who does a good job on the film, and I think an actor can also be the case because like
Yeah.
there are some really good actors who get wasted on bad film. Like Eddie Redmayne, for
Mhm.
example, fantastic actor, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, bad film, but he does a great job performing in that.
Oh yeah, he
Andy
absolutely
Serkis in the
does.
Hobbit movies. Andy Serkis in the Hobbit
Yeah.
movies, amazing as Gollum in Riddles in the Dark. Same deal with Martin Freeman. Martin
Yeah, I was
Freeman's
just gonna
great in
say
those
adorable
movies. They're
Martin
just not good
Freeman.
movies.
He's a great Bilbo Baggins. Um,
It's why Riddles in the Dark is the best scene in the whole films because those two are in it, and it's just taken from the
but
book.
yeah, and people like throw trash at actors being like, I can't believe they sold out and did that crappy movie. And I'm like, you know what? When they were given the script and said, will you be in this? I mean, when you read a script, you can't tell how a movie's going to turn out. So you're really
Yeah.
taking a chance on like, I hope the director does a good job. I hope everyone else does a good job. I hope this movie is marketed well. And you do the best you can as an actor and
Yep.
hope that everyone else does a great job too, because a movie might come
Yeah.
out a piece of crap and you're like, oh, that sucks. And that at that point you can't do anything about it.
I mean, I think with Eddie Redmayne, it's probably just like he wants to make money and then go back to making good films, which I hope he does, because oh my god, Eddie Redmayne. We'll get to that later. Anyway, 2001: A Space Odyssey. Distraction.
Wow.
Okay, I watched 2001: A Space
2001: A
Odyssey,
Space Odyssey.
which I watched because I was on a sci-fi trip, and I feel like it's a film that I had to watch at some point. Like, it's one of those, I'm a film
Probably
student,
true.
I'm gonna go into film, I should probably have seen this. Because it is like the quintessential science fiction epic. Like, and I don't think it's a good film, but I'm gonna like
And
explain
yet,
that
it's
point.
very important for some reason.
I don't think it's a good film because I don't think it aims to do what films traditionally do. It doesn't. It's not a film that's built to entertain, and I see films as entertainment more than art. Like, just because that makes sense, because that's what almost all films go for. But this film doesn't.
Yeah.
Something I was thinking about is that this film is more like staring at a painting and then thinking about that later and
Yeah.
considering what it meant than watching a film. Because it's a lot of lingering shots and a lot of really slow paced, like, just stare at shots of satellites for a while, and you're like, why are you putting this in the film? Like, there's that whole near the end
Yeah, it's
spoilers
not
for
much of a
2001: Space
story.
Odyssey, I
It's
guess.
more like it's more like a
Uh,
bunch of concepts. You're like, here's some stuff
Yeah.
to think about.
Yeah, and while I was watching it, I hated it. I absolutely hated every second. I was just like, this is so boring. I'm not okay with this. I'm so bored. I hate it. It has some good merits while watching it. The effects and visuals are great. There's one really good shot, like on the moon base when they're walking out and they reveal that the monolith is on the moon. That shot is amazing. That is, it's just so well framed. Like, I see what people mean. Like, I've never seen a Kubrick film, but I see what people mean when they say he's a visionary genius. Like, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, it's well directed, it's well shot. The effects and visuals for 1968 pretty on point. And while I was watching it, yeah, it was boring. But afterwards, I started looking into it and I started reading into like other people's theories of what, because the whole point is like, and Kubrick has said like, there is no point to it apart from what you get out of it. You have
Yeah.
to think and you have to interpret it how you want, and that's why I think it's more like a painting because you have to interpret it, or a piece of
Which I
traditional
honestly think
art.
when artists say stuff like that, it's kind of BS because they're like, it all depends on what you get out of it. But like, they either had their
Yeah.
own intentions and they're just wondering if you see them the same, or they had absolutely
Yeah.
no intentions and they just don't want to admit that.
Yeah, like it's really interesting because like the more I thought about it, the more I liked it. Like, I hated it while I was watching it, and then it just grew on me, and not right now. I don't think I could watch 2.5 hours of that again. But at some point, I want to watch it again, and I want to think about it. And while I watch it,
kinda
I want
do
to try
too.
and pick up on clues. Because
Because
there's a bunch of
I feel the same. I hated watching it, but then when I reread the plot synopsis, I was like, this is actually like really interesting stuff. But I didn't enjoy it while I was watching it because I was like, this isn't a movie. It's like, what is it?
yeah, like, and I think that's kind of the point, because the thing I was thinking about is the way that the way that the people interact with the monolith in the film, I think is the same way people interact with the film itself, because when the apes first see the monolith, they freak out, they're dancing around it, they don't know what to think of it, and then after they've seen it, they work out how to use
Has an
tools. It
effect on
helps
them.
them. It
Yeah.
has an effect on them. The same deal, like later on when what's his face, the Dave, he sees the monolith in space and he freaks out, but then he kind of gets it when he's lying in that bed, and it's kind of I almost think it's kind of to say like you're not supposed to get this film straight away, and because Kubrick himself has said there's so many layers to it that you can get out of it, and like
Yeah,
maybe I'm just BSing that, but that's what I almost think it is. I almost think it's a statement on art. It's like the way they
you're
see
not
this
supposed to get it
monolith is
right
the same
away.
way. Yeah, it's the same way we see the film, and I think that's really interesting. I think that's a really interesting point
Well, and
to
it's
pull
it's an
out of something.
interesting idea that like mediums of art will have an effect on you and you won't even realize they will. Like I
Yeah,
love like journaling about the books I've read and like thinking about movies I've watched and I'm like, "Oh, now I can like maybe change this about the way I think or the way I act." But if you walk
yeah,
away from something thinking like that has no effect on me, but it really does, it's like
hmm,
spooky in a way that
yeah,
like things will affect your brain and your life and you won't even realize that
yeah.
you're growing.
Yeah, because I watched this film 2 days ago. Last night, I was lying in bed thinking about it, and I was like, I can't sleep because of this. I've just got. Why? Why am I still theorizing about what this all meant and like how to piece it together? Like, because it's like Kubrick has just thrown pieces of a jigsaw puzzle at you and gone, put them together, and it's
Yeah,
really
and everyone
interesting.
comes up with a different puzzle.
Yeah, like I remember reading someone online saying that it's almost a statement on following people because like a lot of people when you
Hmm.
go online people are saying this is my theory and a lot of people are like that makes sense, I'll adopt that theory, and I've taken a few pieces from other people, but like someone was saying like because in the throughout the film everyone is reliant on somebody or something, you know, during
Yeah.
the moon base sequence everyone's reliant on that one guy. He's saying, you know, we're going to cover this up and he's in charge, and then you know it's the power struggle between Hal and it's like it's a thing of like don't rely on other people, think for yourself, and it's about developing what you want to do. And I don't know, that was I've probably paraphrased that horribly, but that was an interesting point. Different people get different
Hmm.
things, and it's really interesting because that's almost a meta commentary on seeing how other people have viewed the film, and then taking your judgment of what the film's about to be about that. And that was really interesting to me because it's so meta. But like I don't know, it's a mess of a film, but it's obviously
Yeah, it's
purposefully built
definitely a good
as
introduction
art.
to Stanley Kubrick is a huge weirdo.
Did I mention earlier that my bingo chart there was a Stanley Kubrick thing? That's the only
Nope,
block that
but
I
yep,
did this month. But if you want
Stanley
me to
Kubrick
watch,
block.
if you want me to watch other Kubrick films, you
Hmm.
can. I'm not letting you. If you're doing another bingo chart, I'm not letting you repeat squares. That's nonsense. You have to think of a new one to put.
Fine.
I mean,
Definitely
to
my
be
least
honest,
favorite Stanley Kubrick film. Probably like
yeah.
a little disappointing that you watched that one and not pretty much any other one that I've seen. Except
Well,
I don't know, Lolita wasn't that amazing. Um, but I mean, it
I
was
was torn.
still an interesting talk because
Yeah,
like yeah.
I definitely got a lot out of it, and I appreciate that I watched it, and I'm glad you put Kubrick in there to make me watch it because I probably would have kept putting it off otherwise. But yeah, I was torn between this, The Shining, and Full Metal Jacket. But like, I just felt like this was more of a you have to see it film. Um,
Yeah, I
so
agree.
especially
Now,
like as
now
a
you can
film
check it off of
student,
your film
yeah,
student checklist.
as a film student and someone who wants to go into working like as a film editor, I feel like you know it's
It's
something I have
important.
to see.
Yeah. I don't know. It's like an English major needing to read I don't know, the King
Shakespeare.
Arthur legends. Yeah, Shakespeare.
So then this was the same day I'd just watched Space Odyssey, and I wanted to watch something fun to stop my brain from thinking about such a heavy movie. And I was like, time travel, fun, Bill Murray, Groundhog Day. Which
Oh, cool!
is it really time travel? I'd say yes.
I love Bill Murray.
I enjoyed Groundhog Day. I thought it was a pretty good movie. I was expecting it to be way goofier than it was. Like it went to some dark places. Wasn't expecting spoilers. Skip ahead for spoilers, I guess. Wasn't expecting the whole suicide bit. I mean, it makes sense, but I wasn't
Yeah.
expecting it. And it's
Yeah,
so
you're bouncing
dark.
along with the movie, laughing and being like, "Hi, Bill Murray," and then you're like, "Oh, jeez."
Yeah. And it just goes really heartful because it's also like he's quite rapey in that film as well, like because he's manipulating people into having sex with him, and it's like, wait a second, I thought you were supposed to be lovable, Bill Murray. What is this? But it's a really interesting film because it shows so much development of this one character throughout this whole experience he's having.
Yeah,
And
it's pretty fun.
you really see him by the
Crazy.
end actually develop into a good person. Although psychologically that would mess you up. He's not living good day like every day after that. He's because how many days did he spend in that loop?
I don't know.
Like that must have been years in the loop because he learned how to ice sculpt and play piano and all of these things. So it must have been years. So how's he gonna cope? Like it must.
Well, I don't know.
He's
It's
got to have
probably like
PTSD.
it's probably like waking up from a drug trip where like those people who take those drugs and then they have like they go to sleep for half an hour and they're just like I just lived 5 years
Oh yeah.
in a forest with elves and angels and I lived a whole lifetime and then like well how do you go living normal life after having such a realistic dream like that like
It's like, oh, you haven't seen Rick and Morty, have you? There's an episode of Rick and Morty where they go to an arcade, and one of the games is a game called Roy, and it's basically you go into like a VR and you live a life. You forget who you were. You go in and you
freaks
live
me
this
out.
life, and when you die in the game, it just cuts back to your real life and gives you a like a score, and it's like, what? Wait, who am I? I was
Well, like,
Roy.
I don't know I couldn't imagine just
Freaky.
like ending this life and waking up back when I was like, I don't know, like 17 and like
Yeah.
remembering everything I've lived and like wait, no, go back. Like I was living my life like I don't want to do this again differently.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. Groundhog Day's it's a good movie. It's heartwarming. It's fun. It's good. It was a fun ride. I enjoyed it. It was a good
Man,
one to just check off the bucket list of movies because it's one I felt like I had to see at some point, so I did. It was good. I
I
enjoyed it.
honestly want to find like more shows or books that have like that kind of VR thing where like people are escaping and living other lives while like time is stopping because that's terrifying.
Yeah, it's like it's a nightmare. When you actually think about Groundhog Day, like that is a PTSD nightmare. It's horrible. Ah,
Yeah. It's
spooky.
yeah, it's pretty unnerving.
Yeah. By the way, you should watch Rick and Morty. I mentioned it earlier. I've mentioned it to you a few times. You should totally watch it. It's great.
Oh, I will.
Cool. So yeah, then I moved on and I watched the final movie that's technically about time and space. I don't care. It fits the theme, the theory of everything.
Oh yay!
I knew that'd make you happy. Technically, it's about time, sort of. It fits the theme.
It is about
of the-
time
the
because
whole
Stephen
episode.
Hawking's trying to go turn back the clock and find the beginning of time, and that
Yeah.
also has to do with space because astrophysics, and you have to look into space to see time because every time we look up at the stars, we're looking back 8 years.
Yeah. Oh, sad. Anyways, for anyone who doesn't know, this is a story of Stephen Hawking living his life. It's a lot of from the point of view of his wife and the relationship there, which adds this
Yeah.
whole emotional
Because
element.
it's
God, I was
based off the
crying.
book that she wrote about it was
no.
like My Life with Stephen Hawking by Mrs.
Yeah.
Hawking. What was her first name? Sylvia?
No.
No.
What was her first name?
Jane.
Jane. There
I
we
do
go.
not
You
remember
got
that. No, yeah, and it's very much like a love story about like
it.
her marriage to him and like how it was like while he was working so hard and while he was going through his debilitations and oh my
Yep.
gosh.
It's so painful. Like the
Ugh,
scene
it's
that hit me
heartbreaking.
the most was the scene where he reluctantly first gets into a wheelchair and he says, "This is temporary." That
Yeah.
is a beautiful. I don't know if he ever actually said that, but if the screenwriters came up with that, that's beautiful because it's such a beautiful piece of. I love when a biopic takes your knowledge of what did happen and plays with it because
Yeah.
you
And
know
then
that
you're like,
Stephen Hawking doesn't get
"Ooh,
out of that
is
wheelchair.
not temporary.
You know?
Mhm.
So it works on this level of like
Yeah.
what you know plays to what they've written, and it's
And
it's
at the same
beautiful.
time, when they go through those points when he's like when he's like almost dying and in the hospital,
Yeah.
and they're like, he might not survive this, and as a viewer, you're
Yeah.
like, yes, he does.
It's just it hurts constantly. Like even early on when he's just walking a bit funny, and you're just like, oh, I know where this is going. And Eddie
Yeah.
Redmayne is such a beautiful. He plays people, in the Danish Girl and in this
He does
plays
a fantastic
people.
job in
and
this
he does an
movie.
amazing. It's
Like,
just
holy crap! Not just like in the beginning of the film when he's playing like the character convincingly with all of his, he can talk perfectly fine and walk perfectly fine, but later on when he's playing Stephen Hawking as we all know him now, with he's got like his like face is all like stuck in a stroke, and like he has to talk all sideways and move in a certain way, and like I don't know what kind of training he went through to do that. I mean, he must have spent a lot of time with Stephen Hawking, which is like an incredible honor. And oh man, like
Eddie Redmayne is it's beautiful.
He portrayed it so well.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things I noticed early on in the film, he sits with his shoulders at kind of a slant and kind of like in the same position that Stephen Hawking is in his chair. And that was really interesting because like before he's even like when he's only just discovered that he has the disease and he's not freezing up yet, he's still kind of able to move but a bit stiffly. He sits in almost exactly the same position early on in the film before he is stuck in that position, and it's such beautiful like foreshadowing of what's to come, and it just really worked. And it's a beautiful film. Like it's amazing, it's emotional, it's gorgeous, and like one of the things I loved about it was that ending where they did the rewind, and they rewinded the whole thing to show, but not only to emotionally manipulate you because you're seeing him go back to how he was, and that just hurts, but also because his whole theory early on was about rewinding the universe, so it thematically works, and it's also just beautifully put together, and it's great. It's a very good film. I'm glad I watched it. I'm glad that you pushed me to watch it because
it's a good film on both great. like the world of science and like how tough relationships are and marriage and like what like how much incredible strength like Jane had just to endure what she did. And like it made me so sad when she was finally like, I can't do this anymore, because like I'm certainly not a fan of divorce, and like but she like I think you have to understand that she definitely bit off a lot more than she could chew when she married him, and thinking that it was only going to last 2 years.
Oh, it just
but it's a good cried. Solace to know that afterwards they like remained friends and colleagues, and
and there's that beautiful line where they're sitting there and their kids are playing, and he's just like, look at what we made.
Look what we made.
Oh, it's just a really good film. Like, I'm glad I watched it. I'm glad I saw it. But it was one of those films where I kept putting it off because I knew I wasn't in the mindset to watch it, and you have to be in the right. Same deal with 2001. Like, it's like you have to be in that mindset. Like,
you kind of have to know what you're expecting. And with 2001, you never know what you're expecting.
I was just like, what? But yeah, I really enjoyed Theory of Everything. I thought it was great. I'd recommend it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's the final movie I watched this month. It's been a good month, I think. It's been a pretty alright one. I had a good time. If you have suggestions for movies you'd like me to see, I haven't got any in a while. It's quite sad, actually. Like, I really enjoy taking people's suggestions, and I haven't had any for a good while. So if you have any, do please let me know. Tell me what films you want me to see. Even if it's anime, I'll take anime at this point. Send me anime suggestions. Just suggest something. I like having a suggestion, at least one a month.
Someone pay attention to me.
But yeah, it's good. I'm gonna watch more movies next month, and I will see you then, QJ.
All right. Well, I'll see you before then when we do my episode.
Yeah, but your episode's not as important as mine.
Oh, yeah.
Nah, it is. Your episode's pretty good. I don't know.
Whatever.
We have fun.
We'll do it anyway. Alright, it's been fun traveling through time and space with you.
Oh, yeah. I'll play the Doctor Who theme now. Doctor Who's back as well. It's pretty alright. The season's been okay.
They're cool.
Crazy mad cliffhanger right now, and it sucks. But yeah. Time and space. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Bye, everyone.
What an outro.